Greetings everyone, I hope this finds you well. Today's video is focusing on the matter of student debt, which has been described as a national crisis by our political leaders as well as prominent organizations in this country and the media as well. I actually want to start with some good news, which feels like a rarity these days. One of the elements of the coronavirus relief package, or the stimulus package that it is also referred to as in the media, is that Americans who have federal student loans can put off payment of these student loans for 6 months with no interest added to the lack of payment. So for me personally, this is a huge deal. To successfully carry out my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD programs, I had to take out student loans because, in short, I didn't come from money. Now, this was a huge deal and a huge decision for me to make in 2008 and 2009 when I decided to embark upon this professional journey. I had to take out loads of money, and I'll spare you the amount. But when I was taking this money out, the economy was much better in terms of a job market for academics and young PhDs than it is today, or than it was when I first was hired by Rice University in 2015. The starting salary back in 2009, 2010 for a new professor was something like, 80 to 100,000. And let me just tell you, for me personally, right now, my salary is nowhere near that. So I've been forced with this difficulty and this challenge of having to pay student loans without a very high salary. And this is a very, very significant and oftentimes really difficult barrier to kind of leap over. How do we deal with this student loan crisis? So before diving into the numbers of the student loan crisis, let us come to a basic understanding of a student loan. It's the kind of loan that is offered by the government or other financial institutions to a student who is interested in pursuing a degree at a higher educational institution. These kind of loans are obviously payable once that individual graduates, but it's based on the assumption that there will be a job for that person who graduates, and that the salary that the job offers will be able to pay that student loan back in addition to all the other bills that people have to pay in this country. The government, the U.S. government that is, introduced this idea of federal student loans in 1957 with the hope of increasing the accessibility of universities and colleges to young people across the country. One of my student loans, which I noted earlier, is a federal government student loan. So the government gave me money, and the government is receiving the money that I've been giving to them for the last 5 years. The sum of this payment was about $260 per month, and that is not including the 3 other private loans I have. In total, I pay about $600 a month in student loans. Quite frankly, it's brutal. In total, there's approximately $1.6 trillion in student debt. $1.6 trillion. This makes student debt one of the largest consumer debt categories in the United States, with as many as 44.7 million people drowning in it. The average student debt holder leaves college with approximately $33,000, which is obviously not a small sum of money, but let me remind you, for those who do not have money to pay for their master's or their PhD or their law degree programs, you have to take out student loans. And a PhD is 4 to 5 years, sometimes longer. So imagine what a bill or imagine the total number of debt, what that number might look like. The rise in student loan debt, as Bloomberg News reported in February of 2019, can be attributed to many factors, and not just the rising cost of higher education. Demographic forces played a role as the large millennial generation passed through its peak higher education years in the 2000s and 2010s. Another has been the impact of the Great Recession of 2008, both by cutting state funding for public universities, which led to higher tuition, and for pushing some young people from the labor market and into higher education as a way of making themselves more employable. For people between the ages of 20 to 24, the labor force participation rate fell from 75% in December 2006 to about 68% in August 2012. Only within the past couple of years has it begun to recover, but it's still much lower. So imagine what kind of impact this student loan debt crisis has on individuals, communities, and families. For starters, many Americans are unable to buy homes, which is traditionally a big part of living the so-called American dream, as our parents and grandparents were able to, I suppose, achieve. Many Americans don't have the money because of student loans to put down a huge chunk of change on a mortgage. Other Americans are unable to afford basic necessities like rent and grocery stores. Others put off significant life events like marrying, starting a family, buying a house, or initiating their business dreams because, in a simple way, they're buried in debt. The student loan crisis has also been a hot topic during the 2020 presidential campaigns. Several candidates for the Democratic nomination, particularly Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, are adamant about tackling student loan debt. Or let me say they were adamant about it because it's increasingly looking like both have been eliminated. Both Warren and Sanders call for significant cancellation of all student debt for every single borrower in the country. Senator Warren proposed eliminating up to $50,000 in student loans for everyone with household incomes of $100,000 or less per year. Senator Sanders, on the other hand, is for a complete wiping out without any kind of restrictions on this proposed policy. There are also people out there who oppose canceling student debt or really oppose taking measures to alleviate the suffering of Americans dealing with this crisis. One is Silvinas Salinas, writing for the website Real Clear Education. Salinas writes, quote, blanket policy solutions like cancel student debt aren't just costly. They're also poorly targeted because people who accumulate student debt tend to have more education and hence more earning power. For most students, borrowing for college still produces a positive economic return over their lifetimes. So in short, Salinas is arguing that because students take out student loans, they're more likely to get an education, and a degree from an institution of higher education provides you capital, which means that you're likely eventually to be okay. Do you agree with Salinas's conclusion about this idea that there really isn't a student loan debt crisis? Do you believe in that? Carry out some research and perhaps you can come to your own conclusion. Another question for you to consider: what kind of thoughts, concerns, or questions come into your mind when you hypothetically think about taking out student loans? Some of you may have already taken out student loans. So where do you stand on this issue? What is your perspective and your experience thus far? A third question: why do you think so many Americans are opposed to this idea of canceling student debt? And finally, the fourth question is, if you were in a government position, how would you handle the student loan debt crisis, if indeed it is a crisis? What do you think the government should do about this matter? So there you have it, 4 questions. As always, I'm happy to receive your feedback, your answers. You can always contact me via email, via my social media accounts. You can leave a comment below, and I look forward to engaging. Thank you all so much. This is a personal subject to me, and I'm happy to open up more. Wishing you all the best of days, and take care.